Hey everyone, it's Joe Lyons here in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, I'm Jackie here from Copenhagen, Denmark.
And today we're on our AutoHotkey short talk where we were going to talk to someone commented about one of our recent podcasts. We talked about ways to save text, waves from your script. And one person, I forget who it was, mentioned online, they said, yeah, I was brought up, trained that saving your like passwords and things inside your text files isn't safe, and not to do it. And so that was going to be the topic of this conversation is, one, you're right. It's not quote unquote safe. The other thing, nothing really is, right, Jackie? I mean, we've talked about this no matter what you do.
And we have talked about it multiple times, and the reason that we kind of mention those different ways of storing stuff like that, and the reason we do it is that you should probably have some kind of password plugin program, whatever you want to call those, because they'll also take care of storing it safely for you, encrypted. But the thing for the most part and for most users around the world is that if you store passwords in plain text somewhere on your computer, the issue is that when it becomes unsafe when someone accesses your computer. And to me, that's the key, right? If someone actually accesses your computer, nothing you have ever done or will ever do is actually safe on it. So if you don't even write down your passwords, but actually take the time to type them in each time, then a key logger will actually be able to get your passwords.
Yep.
Or there's a lot of ways to do it, and if the hacker has access to your system, again, right, there's a good chance that he'll get access to whatever you do on your computer anyway. And I've seen a few videos on that when people have done that, and one of them was where a hacker were kind of hacking a hacker, which was kind of fun, so to speak. Someone had accessed someone's computer, but instead of doing anything else, he just actually gave him a Trojan back. So, there's a fun little video of someone actually showing you what you can do when you have access to the computer that someone is using. So we not. There's nothing wrong with being more safe.
Right. And I think that's one of the critical points is it's not a black and white, right? It's not you're either safe or not safe. Everything to some degree is not safe. And it's where are you on that compendium, that line. And again, to your point, actually, which we haven't brought up is what is the password actually to? Is it to your bank account? Then, by all means, you want to be as secure as you possibly can. Is it to that they can send an email and then the email isn't tied to anything else that I ever have? I don't care as much about that, right? It's not nearly as critical for me.
Yeah, is it to your Facebook account or some other social media? Do you have a big following where you want to protect it because it has some kind of extra big value for you? Of course, don't store it. But if it's for a script that you're doing yourself, where you're maybe logging into some account for Lyft or whatever, I'm just saying something, whatever it might be that you're logging into, but it's not something that's really life-shattering to you.
Yeah.
I don't feel that you need to really do that much to protect it because you're already on your own system.
Right.
So if someone gets access to your system, you're probably
you're screwed in the first place.
Yeah. Exactly.
But again, and it's the same thing with the locks on the doors, right? The locks keep the honest people honest. They don't keep the people that really want to do it from doing anything. I mean, you can make it harder for them, but for the vast majority of people, and here's the other thing, which Jackie and I we were talking a lot about this earlier with some support we were doing, was the vast majority of people that, even when you use a computer at work, even, they still don't really understand how to like open a text file and where to look for things and what to do. I mean, it's insane. It needs you need a certain type of person that can find, can hack into it and find where you have your stuff.
Yeah, and one of the bigger things is that people think, oh, but I'm gonna be hacked because I'm the center of the universe of whatever it might be. But of course, if you have some kind of special position at your job, or you have access to extra restricted digital stuff, maybe protect those passwords better than others. But yeah, the more you kind of keep your entire T of passwords protected, sure, you'll have a bit more protection. But there's most likely someone at that company that's using password as his password.
Oh, a lot, yeah.
Or password 1 through 3, or the name of their kid plus a number, or their date of whatever it might be. I don't know if people have seen other hacking.
Let me tell it.
But yeah,
a quick story on that. A buddy of mine, he goes to large companies, corporate America, and migrates them to the cloud, right? And so he's way up the chain as far as doing the programming stuff. But he was at, I forget, it was a company like Citi, Citibank, right? I don't think it was actually them, but it was some sort of a financial institution. I remember that, but let's just pretend it was Citi. I don't remember. Maybe it's Bank of America. But he's there, and they had all this, he was dealing with all this password and encryption stuff, and everyone had their own thing. But to log into the admin level that supervised everything else, the password was freaking password, right? So the most important one of all, they just used the word password, and he's just pulling his hair out of really, this is insane. So yeah, it's you see it more often than you think of how stupid people are with their passwords.
I know from all of these companies that I've been in, and I remember recently reading something about Microsoft removing one of the. I just had the word on my tongue a moment ago, but within Windows Professional and the back end of that, having this service that kind of told you that you needed to change your password each 3 months was kind of a preset from Microsoft. You couldn't opt out of it. A company couldn't say they didn't want to do that. Microsoft has recently, or that was what I read, said that they'll remove that.
Yeah.
So there will no longer be forced renewal of passwords. And from what I've seen over the last 10 years is that as soon as people are put in that, they find a system. They find a specific way to keep renewing the same password.
Yeah.
So they'll not go out and create
a long, hard,
weird something they cannot remember.
Right.
They will take summer, spring 89, and then it will be summer, spring 70.
Right.
Or summer, spring 71. And
I'll do you one better. At TI, where I worked for, 9 years, they had really strict, had to have and you didn't get to write it. They listed 20 at a time that you could pick from. Had to have a number, at least one number, had to have a special character, had to have at least an uppercase letter. I think there was one other restriction, I forget why. And it was also, they were all 8 characters wide, right? So they were changed every 3 months. And so they were so complicated, you would find very frequently people would literally write them down on a sticky and put them on their laptops.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't keep up with it. And it was just, it's to your point, right? It's just if you make it so hard, you actually creates a bigger problem. People that one was hard. Well, they found a way around, they found a terrible way around it. What I told people was when I'd see them do it, I'm like, look, pick 1 or 2 characters at the end and put it at the front. And then you have all of them. You just remember when you read it to start, 2 in or 1 in or whatever. And that way it's still written, but at least someone gets that. They don't necessarily know right away, right? It was an easy way to, at least it does something, right?
It's a fair way of scrambling it.
Yeah.
So I remember.
Or add another character, right? There's something. Add one in the middle that's not in it.
Yeah, I know from at least here where when you get a new credit card and have a new PIN code, you actually get a small PIN rememberer, which is I think it's a 5x5 grid of different colored squares.
Oh yeah.
And then you write in your PIN code within the squares somewhere and fill out all of the other squares with different numbers from 0 to 9.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that only you will actually know where you put your PIN code. Where is it diagonally? Is it 1 in and 2 down, or is it whatever? It's just you can have it in your wallet and know your PIN code in any situation, but someone actually picking up that piece of paper would have a really, really hard time because you could have put it as the 4 first squares if you wanted to, and they could try that, but then it's your own fault, right? But they could try any combination, and if you have just done a single thing where it didn't actually go in a straight line, then you'd be pretty safe.
That's right. Yeah. So let's get back. This was actually all on topic. I shouldn't say get back to it, but another thing is there are other options than just putting your text, your password as plain text in your file. Right? It's one is you and it's silly, but you could write some sort of a encryption function that would not store it in plain text, and then they would have to have that function to decrypt it, which of course it's still on your computer, right? Because it's going to have to work. Or of course, that's one. That's what I often do, right? Or the other option, what I do, because I share a lot of my stuff, right, my screen, is I put my passwords in a different file, and then I use the read any line to read it in, and that way, if I ever share my main script, my password's not actually in it, and that it's nice because I never have to worry, like, did I forget to remove my password from here,
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways to do all of that, and if it's storing it for you to manually type it, you can easily encrypt it yourself, because whoever would know what you had actually done, you could move all of the characters 1 in the alphabet, and who would be able to guess it? Maybe if you had something very, very simple word that you were doing that with, so people could kind of guess the word if they were trying to. But if it was something obscure, like rocket science or the name of your pet dog or whatever, who knows, whatever it might have been, that's one way of doing it. But in script, it becomes a bit hard if people have access to how you're decrypting it.
Right.
But if they don't have access to your decryptor, it's almost impossible for anybody to actually.
Yeah. So also what I did was I put my decryption file, because I work under almost every 99.9% everything I do is under Dropbox, right? But that concerned me because what if someone gets into Dropbox? So I put it actually, under a spot not under Dropbox, and that way, again, if someone comes in, unless they're actually remoting into my computer, right? But they get into my Dropbox, they still can't. They don't see my password, right? So it was a nice way to do that. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, and I'd say there's a lot of encryption stuff that you can do, both with AutoHotkey and stuff like that. But again, always remember that you can probably make it so hard that people wouldn't bother, because the value of whatever it is that you have doesn't measure up to how much time they need to ask. So that's a fine balance always, right? So if you have access to less valuable information, how strong of a password protection do you need?
Yeah.
Always back and forth, right? So if you have made a script or something else, or if it's accessing like bank accounts or whatever we talked about, Joe, right? Do think a little bit more about it. But yeah, to me, each time I have a script that needs to access a web page or something like that, I haven't actually been scared of storing the passwords in plain text, because I'm not sharing it with anybody. I don't have it, as you said yourself, on Dropbox. I have it locally. And again, if someone actually hacks into my system, probably.
Yeah, you have the overall protection in the first place, right? That, like, how are they going to get into your system in the first place?
Yeah, and they can probably do it. I'm not saying they can't do it. That's not what I'm saying, because.
Right. But the amount of work, is it worth it?
Yeah, and I'm not better protected than everybody else, but again, I'm just saying, if they're in my system, however I stored my passwords are probably not gonna matter, because it needs to be put into the fields in plain text anyway. So if they're actually listening for that event, again, I'm just saying, there's a lot of ways for someone to just monitor what you're doing. So after a few weeks of viewing, when you're using your computer, you'll have a good idea of what to actually listen for if he wants your information. Again, that's the key, right? Is what you have valuable enough for the guy who's actually accessed your system. So if you have it in a file over here, he can just, in the night where you may be not at the computer, find it, read it, and be gone.
Yeah.
Whereas if you need to type it, or need to read it, or need to decrypt it, he needs to wait for you to take action. That's a bit harder. But if you then have, let's say, a password tool, like I can't remember what they're called, then it's even harder, because of course it's storing it encrypted and only maybe pasting it in. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but either they're sending it as keystrokes, so it's key events, then a listener can get it, or it's pasting it in via some kind of paste, and then the clipboard has had it.
Right.
Or it's sending it in via a message, but then Windows would have had it. Again, if they have access to your system, you're kind of screwed, right? So store it how you feel makes sense for whatever situation you're in.
Which actually, in that, the one that I was going to mention earlier as an example was some APIs I connect to, they have cost to them, and some of the costs, sometimes I have to add dollars, in order to get, I don't have an account on there, so I have to add extra money, but some of them will just automatically charge me, right? And so those where it's like, I have a $20 credit, someone might get this and use my $20, I don't care. But if it's something that there is no limit and it just charges my credit card, or they can actually, usually they can't log in because the API is different than your login, right? Your token, your login. But I was telling someone, because I was doing this with Google Translate, I'm like, look, don't go giving this out, because if it goes viral, I could have all these charges on my Google Translate account. And like, there's no, I'm not aware of, I hope they have some sort of a cap somewhere where they're like, hey, this is a lot of translation we're not used to, we're going to shut it down. But things like that, right? So understanding it.
It at least I know from here in Denmark that most types of financial transactions have some kind of cap somewhere. And at least know with credit cards and stuff like that, you can't just use 1 million in a day.
So the other one, which Jackie and I think we discussed it, I forget which one, another podcast, but a data stream. And I think the simplest way to explain it is, think of it as like file attributes on a file. They're not settings in your file, but they're still there. And so you can actually write plain text, whatever you want, into this, I think it's called a data stream, that it's hidden. It's still on the same file. It's not in a separate file. And yet when you open it with Notepad, you can't see it. And it's a great way, unless you know it's there, you just don't know to even look for it.
Yeah, and you can probably get fancy file explorers that would tell you off the bat, but we did very, very basic kind of searching for it. We looked in the file. We looked at the attributes. We looked at um, if with the tools that Windows kind of is born with to see if we could find what was in the data stream of a file, and it wasn't easily findable. So yeah, to us it seemed like a good um, kind of in plain sight way.
Right. Yeah.
So because yeah, you couldn't actually see the trees, but just yeah.
And here's the other thing, right? I equate it to the whole Windows versus a Mac. Why there's so many more viruses on Windows versus Macs, right? Because everyone uses Windows and very few, comparatively, not that many people use Macs. Well, this whole data stream thing, until it takes off, is where people are actually doing it. Even why would you look there, right? I mean, it's not something you'd be looking in because no one's really using it. So until it suddenly became a thing, like I don't think most people would even bother to try to look there because it's not something most people even, I don't know, maybe criminals, maybe black hat people are looking at it more, but I've never heard of someone using this, so I don't know.
Yeah, and again, we're not saying it's a safe location, right. But this thing we're saying is that to a normal user, it would feel as if it was hidden. Right. And that's maybe the first step of it, not just being in, I'll just open this with Notepad and it's just there, right?
Right. Yeah. It's the lock on the door, right?
Yeah,
it keeps the honest people honest. Yeah.
Yeah. We put the key under the mat. That was what we did, right? So they actually need to go and look under the mat for it. And if you put it in we might not have put it under the mat, but
yeah, a little more. But I get it. It's a good analogy. Yeah.
Under a stone in the driveway or whatever.
Right. Yeah, and there's a dozen stones, and so it'll take a little bit of time. So. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that was a good summary of it's everything is to different levels of security, and it's not necessarily great, but you're never entirely safe anyway.
No, and there's a lot of tools out there. If you actually want to be more safe, go and look for those. They can help you actually achieve a level of password safety. But yeah, for just storing a quick password for whatever you're doing with the script, I don't think you need to worry too much.
All right, Yvonne. Well, that was fun. We'll see you next week. See you, Jackie.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Bye.